This is Recovery Lifestyles with Carmel. Recovery Lifestyles is committed to raising awareness and ending stigmas surrounding addiction and mental health. On today's show, I'll be speaking with Rachel from Recovery by Rachel. Inspired by her own personal healing journey, Rachel opened the Healing Tree Spiritual Wellness Center in 2013. Since then, she has been developing and teaching a new spiritual, energetic, and emotional recovery alternative. Currently, Rachel coaches one-on-one online and in private, and she also has a podcast called Recover Yourself, Reclaim Your Power. Hey, Rachel, how's it going?
Great, Carmel. Thanks. How are you?
I'm good. So super excited to have you on here today, introduce you to my community. I love everything about you. And so with that, do you want to share a little bit about who you are?
Thank you. Yeah, well, thanks for having me on the show. And it's a pleasure to be here with you and your community. So I'm Rachel from Recovery by Rachel. And my history with working with people in addiction recovery is really all things recovery, but predominantly addiction recovery. I used to have a spiritual wellness center in Southern California where I would come and, people would come and see me for a 90-minute, I would call it a spiritual fitness class. And really working with people, men and women, from all ages, from age 18 up to, 60, 70 something, during the detox phase primarily, mostly. And I've had the honor and privilege of working with over 3,000 people. And I would only see people once a week for about 2 or 3 weeks at a time.
Wow.
Maybe a decade, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, 3,000 people taking them through a process. And that was to get sober from drugs and alcohol, or was that trauma?
Well, it's usually both. What I found was, people who had been through drug and alcohol detox often had some childhood trauma. And some people knew their trauma. They were okay to talk about it. Some people didn't know their trauma. They didn't want to talk about it. And some people didn't know their trauma, so they couldn't talk about it. So there are different ways to look at it. But I would really be able to offer some intuitive insight and guidance, especially for the people who couldn't really fathom or see or understand necessarily what their trauma was. They could sort of do their storyline and piece it together, but they didn't really know. They'd say, I can't remember anything before age 9. So, very gently, very delicately helping people piece together really, but on their own, because it's important that we remember these memories on our own so that we feel the resonance and the truth of them in our system so that we can begin to heal them.
Okay. And so was this part of a 12-step program, or was this something that you created on your own?
I created it on my own. I had a spiritual wellness center called Healing Tree, and I worked with several recovery centers who were in the same building as me. So part of their day-to-day program they had in their detox phase, they would come to me for 90 minutes and I'd work with them. And then I'd also do one-on-one coaching, private coaching. And then on Thursday nights, I had a public class open to anybody and everybody who wanted to come, which was a similar version to the other class, but it was by candlelight and it was less teaching, longer meditation, some hands-on energy healing as well, which was really, really lovely. So a lot of people would come after their AA meetings. There was a meeting upstairs.
Oh, that's cool.
Building. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was fun. It was fun.
So, and I guess we were chatting before this started and we were talking a little bit about narcissistic relationships. Do you want to lead into that?
Sure. Yeah, that's a big subject, but basically what you and I were talking about, Carmel, is that there's this tendency in community, I would say right now, for people to be labeled as narcissists, and it's a severe narcissistic personality. It's a severe cluster B personality disorder. Mm-hmm. I'm not a psychologist. I haven't studied this in school. This is just based on my experiential knowledge and coaching for nearly 10 years. But we all have narcissistic tendencies. We all have narcissistic traits in us. We can be super selfish, super self-focused, all about me, and I. We can manipulate, we can coerce people. I mean, we all do it. If we're honest with ourselves, we all do it. We don't do it to the extent of somebody who has narcissistic personality disorder. And these can be very, very, very damaging behaviors or relationships for us to be in. And usually someone who's narcissistic, a true narcissist who has narcissistic personality disorder, is partnered with a codependent, which is really an AA term. I like to call it somebody who overfunctions. So for a lot of us, I'm one of those.
Yes.
A lot of us that would
Me
be,
too.
yeah, a lot of us, we're very heart-based people.
Yeah.
So we function very much from our hearts. We're usually intuitive. We're usually empathic, and we're sort of like the yin and the yang, the two magnets that come together. We attract them just as much as they attract us. So it's complex. There's a lot of nuances and layers to all of these things. But the other thing that I see goes on a lot is spiritual narcissism, which is really interesting. So my experience of this is people who are in the spiritual community, they're teachers, they're gurus, they're leaders, they're looked up to. And there seems to be this thought pattern that I observe, that because they've had a spiritual awakening, they're all like, as one of my teachers, Matt Kahn, would say, they're all hopped up on the spiritual hot sauce. So, it's sort of a different category, but it can manifest into the same dynamics in a relationship. If you're in a relationship with somebody who is, but they're spiritual, they can't be narcissistic, excuse me. Well, they can, and they can have tendencies, and we all do. So, there's more education and knowledge to be sought on that topic.
Yeah, well, and I think this is an important conversation to have, because it's quite prevalent in the recovery community. A lot of times when people are, recovering from drugs and alcohol, a lot of what I've noticed is there's like this link with childhood trauma and with being maybe in a relationship with somebody who is narcissistic or had the tendencies. And so it's coming up a lot. And that's why I thought, when you brought it up today, I thought this is a really good topic to touch on. So maybe what are some, not tips, but what are some behaviors that we can maybe share with the audience or with someone listening that, may think they're in a relationship like this, or may have past trauma from a relationship like this? What can help them kind of start to figure that out? Like, what are some
that's a great question. So for me, the first sign was confusion. And if you feel confused at any time in your relationship, whether that's emotionally, physically, psychologically, do as I do, not as I say kind of messages, mixed messages. If you find yourself in a place of confusion, that's a huge red flag. So that is step number one. If you find yourself second guessing yourself, if you find yourself being overly accommodating to the person's sensitivities or needs, and this is a tricky one, because we all have compassion and want to have compassion in relationships and be flexible and be mindful and be conscious in our relationships. But if we're over functioning, which is why I like the word over functioning, if we're over functioning in any way, or you find yourself confused, or if you find yourself spending less time with your family and your friends, those are pretty good red flags that there's something going on that we need to look at, that you need to look at, that the listener needs to look at. And really take a step back and, have the courage to ask a friend, say, hey, do you observe this of me? Do you think this is going on? Because I'm feeling kind of confused, and that's a tricky conversation too, to be vulnerable. Or sometimes friends don't want to tell us because they don't want to be stepping on our toes. But, you can save a friend, if you love them dearly, a lot of headache and trauma and grief and psychological and emotional damage, if, you have the courage and the love enough to say, hey, is everything okay with you? Because I observe this is going on. And I actually had a few friends express that to me, and I'm glad they did, because even though I was a little bit in denial, I heard them on some level, and the seeds went in, and eventually they took hold. And I woke up one day and I was like, okay, I think our time together is complete, with the last relationship I was in. So
yeah, and I think it's huge. Like I just find in the world today, as we're getting, the light is getting lighter and the dark is getting darker, that there's a lot of, going back to what you said, these self-proclaimed gurus that people are living off of every word that they say, and yet they don't recognize it until they're too deep in.
Yes.
And I find that this is, we're kind of shifting from this space of a lot of people are realizing the power in getting sober, or realizing that, when I drink or I do drugs, I'm suppressing certain things, so they want to get better. But there's just so much to choose from today. And the 12-step program asks us to believe in a power greater than ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost like a gateway into, it can be a disaster, because there are so many of these self-proclaimed gurus that are carrying this narcissistic type. And unfortunately, people like us who have trauma, who are recovering, it's like a magnetic attraction to these people.
It is.
Yeah.
But, when I was teaching a lot of people in person, I would say, I'm just some lady giving you ideas. You're your own guru. You have your own guru on the inside. If it resonates for you, great. Run with it and take it away. But if it doesn't, it's okay by me. I won't be offended. I'm just here to give you other options to choose from. We can only choose from the options we have, and I'm only here to show you other options. So if you don't believe me, or what I say doesn't vibe with you, awesome. And if it does, awesome. Ask me more questions, and I'm happy to give you more options to choose from. Even for people, Carmel, trying to find a higher power, I met a lot of millennials who were super resistant to the idea of a higher power, or the 12 steps idea or concept of the higher power, because a lot of them had been raised with religion, where they basically grew up with religion being shoved down their throats. So there was a large number of people that I found were super resistant to God, Jesus, the idea of, I don't know, who's God, Christian God, Catholic God, Baptist God, all these kind of different ideas. And one of the things that I learned that they taught me was to really honor and respect each individual's belief of whatever higher power they believe in. And now I know there's this joke in the recovery community about, a doorknob can be your higher power. I don't
The light bulb.
The light bulb, right? I don't agree with that. I explain to people, it needs to be your higher power. It doesn't matter what you call it, but as long as you call it something, and it needs to be something that's propelling you or guiding you forward. And the whole point is that we have some kind of touchstone, because when, excuse my French, the shit hits the fan, we're going to need something. We all need something. And even through, unfortunately, I'm laughing, but it's not funny. Unfortunately, through all of the trauma and abuse that I've been through in my life, like over and over and over again, and I realize it's because I'm in the hot seat as a spiritual guide or a coach or a counselor. My life is a huge petri dish for all of these things. But my higher power has gotten me through every single time. I would not be sitting here if it weren't for my higher power. And I was a late bloomer. I didn't really come to believe or find my higher power until I went through divorce in my early 30s.
Well, and I can relate to that, because I was raised atheist. And when I believed in a power greater than myself, I was led down all of these new age ways that some of them worked for a while, some of them didn't. And then my life was opened up to Christ. And that's when everything has changed. That's when my life has changed. I have changed. And there's no turning back now. So I believe we're all on this journey, and it just makes me so sad. It makes me wonder, okay, so these children that maybe were raised in a legalistic type of religion, what was going on? What, right? To make them turn and walk away, right? Because I don't want to repeat that pattern. Oh my goodness. And I don't want to do that to anybody else out there too. So,
right.
Oh my gosh, this is a heavy conversation.
It is a heavy conversation. I said to one of my best girlfriends the other day, we were talking about it, and we'll talk about these things for hours on end, because that's what we do for fun. And that old story, that old adage, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink, which is what we do as codependents, which is what we do as overfunctioners. We try and pull and drag these people. Come on, the water's here. It's so tasty. Yes. It'll quench you. I promise. So I said to her, when can we just be the water?
Wow.
You just become the water. You live it. You imbue it, and you just become the water, so that they find you, they find the horses find the water on their own.
Yeah,
On their
that's
own.
beautiful.
And it's so, thank you. And you said it so perfectly before, that, all of these are gateways to, higher dimensions. So they're different stepping stones along the path. Nothing's better or less than or right or wrong or anything like that. They're all levels of awakening, if you will, or, consciousness is in the middle, and we're standing around consciousness on a circle, moving along the circle, looking at different perspectives of consciousness. So I believe we're all right where we're supposed to be, even in the moment where we realize we're not supposed to be where we're standing. Right?
Yes.
A conversation with my daughter last night. We're all where we are supposed to be in the moment, and wherever stepping stone you're about to step on your path, it's all divinely planned. And some people may say, well, I don't know, not so much, because I relapsed yesterday. I would say you were supposed to relapse.
Yes.
And I know that's a tough pill, pun intended, for people to swallow. And, it's a big one. And grief is another huge one. I just posted something on Instagram the other day about grief recovery, and I got a few comments. I got some people upset. Grief is horrendous.
Yes.
It's hideous. It's beautiful. It's difficult. It's challenging. My experience with grief is that it cracks our hearts open to a point. Eventually you get to a point where your heart just stays open. It doesn't close back up. And I can honestly say the amount of grief that I've had to deal with in my short years on this planet has done that. And I'm grateful for the awakening that grief has given to me. But I would never have said that 3 years ago, probably. It's when you're on the other side of it, and you can make sense of all of the steps along the way and where it's taken you to, it's really quite remarkable. And then my heart opens even more, because then I'm in complete awe of my higher power, and I can embrace more of life, and like, oh, we're doing this now, and being in the gutter and feeling gutted and crying on my floor and, looking, not my best for days on end, because I'm grief stricken, literally grief stricken, and my vibration drops, and I'm lethargic, and I, can barely get myself food or water for a couple of days. It's okay, because even in those moments, how do we find God with a big G? How do we find God in that? So last summer, unfortunately, I had back surgery. Not many people know this. I didn't tell many people, but I had back surgery. I had a herniated disc, and I would lie on the floor in the most excruciating pain for about 7 weeks. And as I would lie on the floor on ice, I would say to Jesus, my higher power, I would say, okay, what's this all about? What's in this? What are we doing?
Yeah.
And all I heard was, can you find God in the pain? And I just would completely surrender into the pain. I would completely fall into the physical pain of my nerves down my legs screaming at me. And every time I would just go in and I would say, okay, I think I found God in the pain. Let's go to surgery now and get this fixed. And I did. But the gifts that come with these challenging experiences, of course, when you're in the moment, it's so difficult to see. And, you're not in the head space or the heart space to really be able to identify that or seek that or find that. But really, I believe that's, this crazy, beautiful life that we all have and we're all experiencing and living is just that. It's a crazy, beautiful life. So how do we balance the yin and the yang, the crazy and the beautiful? How do we find love for both? And I believe that's when we become more awakened, is when we have love for our anger. We have love for and the non-judgmental love. I'm talking about God love, right? Like when we have love for our anger, when we have love for the hate we might feel for the moment in our hearts towards somebody who wronged us. Like those are all spectrums of being human in the human emotional scale. You're supposed to feel those things. And if anybody tells you you're not, I would disagree with them, and I'll tell you why. You came here to be human, so let's be human. And that means feeling of all those feelings. Then when you have given yourself permission to feel all of those feelings, only then we can transcend them.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't transcend them until you experience them. I had a young guy in class say, I'm taking the Buddhist path. I'm just transcending all of my anger. I said, how's that working for you? And I could see his face was bright red. I said, how's that working for you? He's like, it's okay. And I said, I feel like you have a lot of anger in your system connected towards your dad. And he just kind of looked at me. I said, you need to process that anger before you can transcend it. It's the only way.
And I think there's a link going back to the narcissistic type of tendencies, behaviors, is what I'm finding on my journey is that people who are not processing their feelings and they're shutting them down, this is where that's coming from.
Yes, absolutely.
There's a huge link.
Yeah, because narcissism is narcissistic personality disorder is a CPSTD response.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, it's interesting. I was thinking about it the other day. I was thinking, all of us codependents should have a party, and I say this in jest, we should all have a party to celebrate that we had a choice at some point whether to become a cluster B personality type disorder or something else, or become a codependent. And of course, there are other things in there too, but on some level, we made a choice. At some point, we made a choice to become
avoid
the overfunctioner.
Yeah, avoid the pain or deal with the pain, right? Stuff it down or bring it up and let it get messy. And I mean, healing is not pretty, right?
No, it's not. That's not pretty. It's not fun. Addiction is emotional pain management.
It's not going to yoga and getting manicures and having bubble baths, right?
Right.
Social media is sharing us. It is ugly.
Yeah.
Well, as we start to wrap up, is there anything on your heart that you would really love that you'd like to share?
Thank you. Yes. To say to people, you're doing great. You're right where you're supposed to be. Try not to be so hard on yourself. There's so much out there in media, news, culture, billboards, bus shelters about being good, better, best all the time. And the most important thing is that we are happy with ourselves, happy with our progress. It's not about perfection, and to recognize and celebrate our small wins, because we get so lost in the shuffle of all of these perfect ideas and notions, how life is supposed to be. And you're only supposed to be doing you. You're not supposed to be doing anybody else. You're just doing you.
Yeah. Does she have something to say?
My dog's agreeing. He's chiming in.
I couldn't remember if it was a boy or a girl.
It's a boy, yeah.
He has something to say.
He does, yeah. He's very vocal.
Well, Rachel, thank you so much for taking the time to come on and chat and share your wisdom with us. And I appreciate you.
Oh, thank you, Carmel. I appreciate you too. And I appreciate all the work you do for such an amazing community. And I hope we'll get to do this again soon.
I'm sure we will. Thank you.